Breakfast with Bob.
Hey everybody, Bob Babbitt here. Breakfast with Bob. We're brought to you by PTO, the Pro Triathletes Organization, by Amp Human, by VeloFix, by Norma Tech, by Form Goggles, by UCAN, and by our Challenged Athletes Foundation. Our first guest on remote Breakfast with Bob, the one, the only, the four-time Paralympian, Ironman finisher, Mr. Rudy Garcia-Tolson. Roodster, how you doing, man?
I am doing well. I'm honored to be guest number one, Breakfast with Bob from home.
First of all, what the heck? What, you got a raccoon on your face? What do you got going on there?
You know, I've been stuck in my house for about a month now, and I decided to let it rip. I had it a few years ago. It didn't look very good, so I'm trying round number two.
Yeah, well, it doesn't look very good, but that's okay. I used to have one. People may tell me how bad it looked too. So you've done 4 Paralympics. How hard is it when you've gone through that? Like you're used to, you finish a Paralympics and then you start the build, so a little time off, and then you start building up to the next one. How hard has it been this year not to be part of that cycle? Because 2016 was your last Paralympics.
Absolutely. It's been definitely a big challenge for me. And it's not necessarily, not being in the pool, but really adjusting to a new lifestyle, so to speak. I've been living out in New York City for 3 years now. I work with the New York Roadrunners, and I do a lot of coaching as well. And so not being in a athletic routine, swimming twice a day, part of a team, has been really challenging. It almost feels like I'm no longer who I used to be. And, I know it's as a Paralympian or Olympian, you try your best not to be defined by your sport. When you leave the sport, it kind of leaves a hole there. And so, me personally, I had a very hard time getting over that, not going for another games. But I've been able to keep myself pretty occupied here in New York City. And I've been doing a lot of good work here. But, as any Olympic or Paralympic athlete who decides to call it a day, and when the next ones come around here, like this year or next year, you kind of start to feel like you're missing out, or you want to be a part of it. So I definitely went through all those emotions. But I've been able to, really pursue a little bit of a different career outside of the pool, outside of triathlon, and I've really enjoyed it. I kind of feel like I've grown up a lot over the past 3 years living in New York City. But it's been an amazing journey, and we'll see what happens.
If there's a city that you'd look at as the most inaccessible in terms of, you've got subways, you got stairs everywhere. For someone who's a double above knee amputee, I don't think you could have picked, and weather being an issue, I don't think you could have picked a tougher place to live than New York City. How has that been, going from being a California kid to living in New York City and functioning in New York City?
Yeah, it's been almost the way I describe it to people every day when I go to work and when I come home, I have to go through an obstacle course. One way obstacle course and another way an obstacle course. I take the subways, walk the streets, and there's a lot of walking and a lot of stairs. And so I'm not necessarily too worried about going down the stairs, but what goes down's got to come back up. So I always got to take those handrails all the way up. And it's New York City. You see and hear everything. And for me, I'm probably the only guy in New York who wears shorts during the winter time. It could be negative 20 degrees, snowing, ice. I still got shorts on. And you can imagine the looks and the things that I hear when in the subways. I've heard it all. I've seen it all. I've been asked almost every type of question imaginable. So it really forces you to not sweat the small stuff, because if you're having somewhat of a bad day and someone comes up to you in the subway and right away just says, "Wow, what happened?" or some other remark, initially you want to lash back out and say, wow, don't ask me that. You can say hi, but you just learn to adapt and don't sweat the small stuff, because People are always going to be staring. People are always going to be looking. But you know what? I like to swag it. You know, I put my headphones on and I just go through my day. And you know, I think the good part is that there's at least one person who sees me and sees my legs and says, "Well, dang, what's my excuse?" You know, and I think that's a beautiful thing. So.
It is a beautiful thing. So as a kid, and right now everybody is sheltering in place, and you had you went through 15 operations. You spent probably the first 4.5, 5 years of your life in a hospital, right, or at home, not being able to do much in a wheelchair. Do you look back at, you draw on some of that now? The fact that you spent a big chunk of your early years sheltering in place before you had your legs cut off, before you were the one who made the decision to have your legs amputated above the knee. And when you look at what people are dealing with now, how do you draw on what you went through back then?
It's a way of thinking. You know, when I was growing up, I literally my childhood was shelter in place. You know, I couldn't go outside very much. I couldn't really be a kid, and so a lot of my time was spent in the hospital or inside my house, watching through the window.
Right.
And so having that experience as a young kid, and now being in a situation where the whole world is sheltered in place, you know, to me, it's a mindset, it's a way of thinking, and if you let your environment control you, then it can be very overwhelming. But at the end of the day, you know, I find that connecting with family, connecting with friends, and going on my daily runs has been a big help in this situation. But, you know, again, we're all in this together, and, you know, we can only do the best we can with what we have. So.
When I talk to people about you and they say, oh, God, this kid had his legs amputated when he was like 6 years old, and he came back from that to achieve so much as a swimmer, and then becoming the first double above knee amputee to finish Ironman, finished Ironman Arizona. At the same time, a lot of people don't realize the financial struggle and realize that, you know, that you grew up in a trailer, right? And it was a number of other kids in the trailer, and you didn't have to get your own bed until you were, what, 13, 14 years old. You bought the family house when you were 11. The fact that you had to overcome so much financially, how did that change you?
Mother and two older sisters and a stepsister, and we grew up in a trailer park. I grew up inside a mobile home park. My dad was a full-time cook at a truck stop, and my mom really just took care of us kids. And I remember growing up, never having my own bed. We usually slept on the couch. Going outside was probably one of my favorite things to do when I could.
Yeah.
You know, growing up with, you know, being financially challenged, I would say, you know, I was really the main breadwinner in my family by the age of 8 or 9 years old. So it was really paying a lot of the bills and helping out the family where I could. But you know, as a young kid, it's really hard to understand the full aspect of making money and helping and supporting your family. But at the time, I figured it out. It was my obligation. It was my duty to make sure that my family was taken care of. And if I'm going to get something to eat, they're all going to get something to eat. And that was really my mentality through it all. And like you said, when I turned 12 or 13 years old, I put a big down payment on my mom's house where she currently lives now, and it's been one of the best things I've ever done. I mean, I don't think there's too many 12, 13-year-old kids out there who can say they've put a down payment on a house. So it's definitely it was definitely a experience, but I don't regret any of it.
That to me is amazing when you start thinking about. And when did you get your first sponsor? Were you like 7, 8 years old when you were a sponsored athlete?
Yeah, I was 7, 8 years old when I got my first sponsor. It might have been Power Bar,
I think it was.
or Flex Flip. And then right after that, I became an ambassador for the Challenge Athletes Foundation. So by the time I was 10 years old, you know, I was making a good amount of money on my own. And sometimes I think, wow, what if I would have, just been greedy and kept all that money, I probably would have been the only kid in high school driving a BMW or
Exactly.
probably glad I didn't do that because they say money goes to your head, and thankfully I've been able to make it this far without putting too much stress on the financial part of life. So
When I was at the Paralympic trials, swim trials 2016, and you're there, there's Roderick Sewell there, there's Haven Shepard there's David Gelfand there. I mean, these are your minions. These are the ones that when you were 10, 11 years old, you took Roderick under your wing, right? Who was 7. And to see at that point him going to Paralympic trials, and see Haven Shepard, who obviously, when we started CAF, there was you, and then there was you and Roderick. So getting a picture of the CAF kids together didn't take very long. It was
very easy.
Now there's 100, right?
Yep.
And that happened because you were on the Disney Channel, and because people saw videos of you on Oprah with Robin Williams, and they were like, well, my kid's been told he'll never run, or my kid's in a wheelchair. And being there, and I'm sure you were wrapped up in, this is the Paralympics. I'm trying to make another Paralympic team. But looking around and seeing that those kids who you knew had been following in your footsteps, what did that mean to you?
It really means that there's something very impactful that I'm involved in, and something that I'm doing. And at a young age, you don't really necessarily understand the full aspect of being able to motivate and inspire somebody. And it wasn't until really 2016 at trials, like you said, where I got done with my main event. I had a great swim. I knew that my chances of making the 2016 Paralympic team were strong. And so I was able to kind of take it all in. And by looking around, like you said, Haven, there was Cody McCaslin, David, all these kids who literally I grew up with. And not grew up with, but I was, 10, 15 years older than all of them. But I watched them grow up. And so for one, it makes me feel really old. So I kind of understand how everybody says that to me. Wow, I've grown up so much. So I get it now. I don't get upset about it. But the other part is it's just, it's indescribable. There's no money, there's no medals, there's no records, there's no finish lines that can substitute what with the help of CAF, with the help of everybody around me and myself, there's no substitute on what we've done and the path that we've helped create for some of these kids. It makes it all worth it. I can go to sleep. I'm happy. I know that, what I've done in my life has impacted others and it's helped others. And, at a young age, you can ask anybody who was around me. I never liked being on TV. I hated interviews. I didn't want to be in the spotlight. I just wanted to be a kid. I just wanted to go out and play and
Right.
do what all kids do. And like I said, it wasn't until my later years that I started to realize that I've done something pretty cool.
So how do you go from your long event in swimming is a 2 minute and 30 seconds 200 IM, and then you decide, I think I would do the Ironman, which is going to take me probably north of 16 hours, right? The transition from doing fast twitch, hardcore, even though you were training all day long, Olympic Training Center, and you're doing long swims, getting ready for something like the Ironman's a different ball of wax. How did you handle that mentally and physically?
Well, the way I got into the idea of Ironman and finishing an Ironman was, okay, for one, I'm surrounded by a bunch of crazy Ironman finishers already, like yourself. So it's really hard not to get that bug of wanting to do an Ironman one day. I remember the first time I thought about doing an Ironman, I was probably 11 or 12 years old, watching the NBC special on TV about Kona and watching these guys out there, watching Sarah Reinerton, watching Carlos, watching David Bailey, watching all these athletes out in Kona go through what they go through in that day, all the ups, all the downs, It was a natural thing for me to say I want to go do that one day. And it's definitely a hard transition, but the mentality and the mental toughness that you have to be a Paralympic swimmer or an Olympic swimmer really helps out when it comes to the Ironman training. We're in the pool, 2 times a day, 2 hours a session. A lot of looking at the black line, but a lot of what we do is a lot of endurance. And so being able to have the mental capacity to suffer day in and day out, a lot of that came from my swimming background. But getting into Ironman and triathlon was, the biggest challenge was the bike for me. It's just I grew up riding a bike as a kid outside, my BMX bike and my mountain bike, just being a kid. But getting on a road bike, I remember I got on my first road bike when I was maybe 11 or 12 years old. And it was a Griffin. I remember we were at BNL in San Diego, and Dano set me up on this Griffin, and it just felt really fast and smooth. And I think one of the next races I went to, it was in the California Speedway in Fontana, California. I got to ride around the Speedway there on my bike, and just having that feel of going fast. And not really going too fast for myself. I thought I was going fast, but being able to just be out there with everybody else and suffering with everybody else kind of gave me that little push forward to pursue Ironman. And in 2007, I did my first half Ironman in Clearwater, Florida. I remember just before getting into the water, you came over to me and were like, "Hey, homeboy, you're doing awesome. We're all proud of you." And then I got into the water. I swam. I got off the bike. Of course, that race was a big draft fest. So I remember there was literally packs of 100 blowing by me, and I was getting mad because I wanted to be in that. I said, screw it, everybody's drafting. I want to get in there. And I remember one time I thought I might go for it. So I decided to try to keep up with the group, and it didn't last more than a half a mile. But, I got on the run. I ended up finishing my first half Ironman in like 7.5 hours, and, not really thinking too much of it. That's kind of easy, and instead of going for a Kona in 2008, I decided to focus on Beijing, on my Paralympic swimming career. And then in 2009, I decided to gear back up for Ironman. And of course, the goal was Kona in 2009. The first race I did in 2009 was in Clearwater, actually Wildflower. Sorry. I did Wildflower. It was a hell of a day. Finished in like under 9 hours. Very terrible, but anybody knows Wildflower, it's a tough course, brutal course. And I ended up making it. I finished it. And then the next race I did might have been Hanu or another Ironman. And going into Kona, I wasn't 100% health-wise, but I was there, and I wanted to make the best of my situation. And everybody knows how Kona didn't go really the way I wanted it to. There's a lot of factors in there, but at the end of the day, I missed the bike cutoff by 15 minutes or so. So instead of giving up and trying again later, I decided to try for Arizona 5 weeks later. And I got connected with Muddy Waters, coach up in San Jose, who really took me under his wing and gave me the tough love, the muddy love, and took away all my hot Cheetos.
You went through your car, took out all the hot Cheetos, and had you in bed at 6 o'clock at night?
I wanted to be in bed at 6 o'clock. The way that man had me working every day. We were up at 4:30 in the morning, in the pool at 5. And then right after that, I go for my ride, and then I had to go for a little run. So it was something that I needed at the time. And with the muddy love that I got, I was able to go to Arizona and ended up having somewhat of a great day, I would say. The swim was cold, brutal swim. I lost my goggles right at the starting line. I wanted to just go for it, whatever. Goggles are a luxury in some places, and so I got on my bike and I felt pretty good the first loop. The second loop, I had a flat, so it gave me a chance to get off my bike and stretch a little bit, which was nice. And then the third loop, I was, wondering what am I doing here? This is crazy. As my back started to hurt, my legs started to hurt, everything just started to hurt. And the goal was to get off that bike. And so I remember finishing the bike in about 8.5 hours, I think it was.
Yeah.
And doing the transition, and it was really the beginning of my race, because I never ran a marathon before. So going into my first marathon after finishing the bike and the swim, I was in good spirits, actually. I really thought that I was going to nail this thing and a lot faster than I ended up finishing. And again, 3 loops around that Ironman Arizona course. First loop, I think I held like 8-minute miles, just going for it. The second loop, I definitely hit my wall. And then the third loop was survival. I mean, the amount of pain that I had in my stump and in my lower back, there was nothing else that I could think about but the pain. Every step that I took, it was just pure pain. And it was a challenge for me mentally, because I wanted to quit. I wanted to not today. But I knew that that's what happened in Kona, and I didn't want that to happen again. I figured I made it this far, less than 10 miles away. You gotta do it. And I think at mile 21, it was dark outside. I decided to just lay flat on the floor and take it all in for a minute or two. And then a voice came in my head that said, "Dude, you got 6 miles, 5 miles, dude. Go. What are you waiting for?" So literally the last 5, I don't remember, it was 5 or 6 miles of that marathon, I ran nonstop, and I just wanted to get done. I literally just blocked all the pain out of my mind and just thought about that finish line. And more, I thought about how am I going to remember this? How am I going to remember this day? Am I going to remember this day by not finishing again? Or am I going to remember this day where I fought and I made it to the end, and I decided to go for it even more, fight it even more, even though I was down, I was bloody, I was bruised, but I wasn't done mentally and physically. I knew that I had more in me, and that's really, for me, that was a defining moment in seeing what I was made of. And when it came down to that dark place, I fought, and I'm proud of that. And I credit that to everybody who was in my ear the whole time. Everybody who was pushing me, everybody who got me to that finish line, because it wasn't me. There's no way in heck I would have been able to do that on my own. There was absolutely no way. It was the team behind me that really pushed me even more than I thought I could. So very, very defining moment for me. It really made me realize that there's in a situation like that, I could push forward, and you can count on me to get it done, because that's what I want to do, and that's what I did. So it was a beautiful day. I remember I got back to my hotel room at like 1 o'clock, and for the life of me, I couldn't sleep. I was so pumped with caffeine and goo and energy bars that I could not sleep. And I think I got about 2 or 3 hours of sleep. And of course, the next morning, you came to my room at like 7 a.m. and were like, "All right, get up, homeboy, we gotta go." And I'm looking at you like, "This man is crazy. I can't even get my legs on." But I actually went to the banquet the next morning and thanked all the competitors for all their go Rudies and high fives that they gave me, because literally Ironman Arizona 2009, almost every single person who was racing, who was in their own battle, gave me some love, and that is unlike any other sport, I think. So
love it, Roodster. As always, such a pleasure to chat with you, man. Stay safe and sheltering in place. You're someone who's lived through this before, and this is that you can get up and go outside and do stuff. Back then, you couldn't do any of it. Thanks, bud, for always taking time to chat.
Thank you, Babbitt. Be safe, everyone.
Again, Bob Babbitt here. This is Breakfast with Bob. We're brought to you by the Pro Triathletes Organization, by Amp Human, by VeloFix, by Normatec, Form Goggles, You Can, and our Challenged Athletes Foundation. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll catch you later.